and welcome to the Decking Awesome podcast. My name is Kira, and I'm joined by the awesome Owen and Brian.
Hello.
Today we are going to talk about Senet, an ancient Egyptian board game that is over 5,000 years old, according to the Smithsonian. It was played for over 2,500 years and evolved significantly over that time. So I guess the first question is, how do we know anything about Senet? So the game Senet was found in ancient Egyptian tombs. So we have the pieces on the board that have been excavated from a lot of tombs. And different people had versions of the game as well. So we have Tutankhamun had at least 5 sets in his tomb with different types of pieces and different types of boards. And there were wall paintings as well. Queen Nefertiti and S3E4 both had paintings in their tombs of them playing Senet.
S3E4 sounds like a woman who reaches out to you on Facebook to sell you some multi-level marketing stuff after you haven't talked to her for 20 years.
I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong. So, but Egyptian is not a language I know much about. So it must have been played by a wide variety of people, because actually there was also Egyptian graffiti on one game that had people saying, "It was alighted. Be happy, my heart, for I shall cause you to see it taken away." And it's of 2 people playing, and then the other player responds with, "You speak as one weak of tongue for passing as mine." So like some early forms of trash talk that maybe didn't translate so cool.
Old Egyptian smack talk. And thou comest here with those papyrus? No, not in my pyramid.
So the British Museum online also has like a satirical papyrus of ancient Egyptians playing, but it's of a gazelle and a lion playing Senet. It seems to have been part of like everyday life and all around. Now, some things that have been stolen over time, we only have fragments. We don't have the full details of like rule books, unfortunately, did not survive from way back then. So some things did, some things didn't. Owen, what depictions of board games do you think from today will be left for future generations?
Yeah, I think Senet was used by everybody, yeah. And I think board games, obviously, today are used by everybody. Yeah, there's definitely a big parallel between those two, you know, especially because some board games in the past can be very, you know, specific to a certain place. But yeah, if I was thinking of depictions of board games from today, you always see dogs playing poker, which is always a classic one you see paintings of. And, you know, but I like the idea of some board games being remembered as like astronauts playing terraforming Mars on Mars. I think that'd be a really cool idea.
Can you imagine trying to move those tiny little cubes with the big ass gloves?
It'd be very cool. I might teach the astronauts something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you could definitely see like, you know, murals of like pigeons playing King of Tokyo in New York as well. Or sorry, King of New York in New York. That would be cool. Yeah, because I can definitely see certain board games meaning a lot to people and having this wide audience that they're kind of part of our culture. So yeah.
Cool. And Brian, what do you think might survive, the remnants of our board game society from today that might survive into the future?
I mean, a little bit of me is worried that there's just going to be some ill-fated game of Monopoly one day that's actually going to cause the end of the world. Like a few of world leaders sit down for a chat around a game of Monopoly, and that's it. That's it. We're just screwed after that. It's like, just build a hotel, release the houses. No. I like to think that, you know, if for some reason we all disappeared and so did all of the rule books associated with our games, but the games survived, that someone would pick them up and at least know, you know, they were probably entertainment. Like they were probably something we used to pass the time. I know we're sitting here judging Senet going, oh, it's probably played by kings who were depicted as gazelles fighting against each other. You know, I like to think someone is watching me slowly butcher one of a nice long Euro game, thinking I have a great long-term strategy, and someone's going, oh, this man is wise. This man is wise. And then I lose. But yeah, entertainment.
Kira, what kind of board game depictions do you think are going to last for future generations?
So I think like, you know, the digital era of technology, maybe YouTube videos and blogs and a lot of like digital fragments of our lives might survive. I'd be worried though that you'd only get like caught up in the mainstream stuff. So like all like any controversy around seems to go have a much broader reach than just a family sitting around playing a game. I think those things might be lost, which would be a pity because that's like the majority of it, right? It's just small games with friends. I do think that board game magazines and things have good depictions of like the industry as a whole. Like they have lots of fun and interesting articles on the events and all the things that we host as part of like the community. So I think that bit is really, really good. But yeah, I'd be a bit worried that all that'll be left of our society will be people fighting on YouTube in 2,000 years.
Yeah, the YouTube comment section just.
But isn't that what everyone worries about? I think that a lot of the things that survived from ancient Egypt were from like quite the aristocrats. So I think in Tutankhamun's case, he had like ebony and ivory pieces and gold pieces that survived, and you're probably getting like the best sets, right? So you know, his tomb was preserved because he was royalty and he wasn't just his objects weren't just buried in the ground somewhere for anyone to pick up. And I think that I like the idea of like the best of the board games surviving. I think that I personally would love like if in my tomb I had like the Ticket to Ride limited edition or my Stone Age 10th anniversary one, or even like the sparkly Arboretum set that I have that has all those pretty little shiny sparkles on it. I don't know if the sparkles survive. I don't know what they're made of. Who knows? They're probably quite unenvironmentally friendly, so maybe they will survive if I'm buried with them. So Brian, what do you think if you had to be dug up in 5,000 years and you were buried with a board game, what board game do you think you'd like to be buried with?
First of all, for anyone who's wondering, yes, we have already invested very heavily in tombs. We feel like it's an investment that's going to pay back in the long run. We're not really sure how, but we're confident. I don't know. I like to think, presumably, I'm going to be buried somewhere vaguely adjacent to you. So I want to really mess with the archaeologists who find us. Like, you'll have your nice fancy chess set or something. I would love to just have like my nice 3-player chess set just to really confuse them. They're like, oh yes, chess, I remember this. What is this guy? He's got a hexagon. What is happening here? Who is he? What is going? He must be better than them. He has more shapes, more sides. He was the king. Ha ha ha. And that's how I assume archaeologists will speak in the future. And I defy anyone to prove me wrong.
I love the idea of someone cracking open a coffin and seeing like Ticket to Ride, and then just imagining the past and going like, oh, they must have built like train journeys with certain colors, and only one train company was allowed to go from one place to another, and it has to be orange. And they didn't, like, a complete like misunderstanding of the train system, because they have the train tracks, they don't have the rules maybe of how people build trains. They just making wild assumptions that these board games are real and this is how people actually did it.
I like in this assumption as well, the board game in a coffin survives longer than trains and train tracks.
Yeah, the train tracks survive in my thing. Maybe the trains do, but not the understanding of, you know, the colors and how they work. Yeah, I had a similar thing. I think if I had to get buried with a copy of Dice Summers, definitely. But yeah, I was gonna probably get buried with Blood Rage as well. I think Blood Rage is a great one. It took me ages to paint those miniatures. You can see them on Instagram. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. But I think it'd also be really cool if the board game somehow survived and I ended up in Valhalla. Because I think they would have a great crack playing a game of Blood Rage.
Absolutely. I am sure all generations of Nordic people would love a good old game of Blood Rage.
Of course, they obviously might misunderstand Blood Rage and think that's how the world ended. And they're cracking up my coffin. It's like, oh, this is how it ended. Krakens and Vikings and fighting over stuff.
We thought it'd be a giant dog.
We have a lot of pieces that survived and a lot of objects that survived with Senet. What do we know about actually how Senet plays? So it was believed to be a strategic game where players are trying to get their pieces to the end of the board. Each player had the same amount of pieces and they could block the other person. So there was some sort of strategy involved. And the players progressed using casting sticks and bones, which I assume was like old school dice. So they don't believe it started out as a religious game, but over time it became one. It became about like the journey across the board, representing the movement of the soul across the Egyptian realm of the dead over time. So that's according to an article in Science magazine anyway. It was also included in the Book of the Dead, where a deceased player plays against an invisible opponent. So there were clearly cultural links in there with the afterlife and death and the journey. So the board game played a crucial role in society where it could be linked with such important topics that were valuable and that were important to the Egyptians.
I hope someday one of our games spawns a religion.
It's a lot of pressure though, right?
No, I just wanted to be as confusing as all hell.
So then what do you think of religion in other board games?
I don't know. I think it's too divisive a topic. Like, I mean, I feel like because everyone has an opinion on religion, whether you like religion, whether you don't like religion, whether you like your religion but not other religions, whether you're just, on board with religion, or whether, it just doesn't interest you at all. It's very hard to make a religious themed game that appeals to everyone. Like it's one thing to have, old gods or anything like that from religions we don't really follow anymore. But a religion based around, say, Hebrewism or Christianity or Islam or anything like that today, I feel like even from a marketing point of view, the moment you release that type of game, you're alienating people who might enjoy the mechanics of the game, the way the game is played, but the story of it, doesn't appeal to them. Like for the same reason, I wouldn't buy an old style war game. Like I know people do like them, but it's just not my thing. The story of it or the theme of it would put me off straight away.
So what do you think about religion in board games?
I don't know. It can be tricky, like Brian said. I agree with all the points he was saying. I think some of the older religions can be messed around with quite easily. So there's a game like Santorini, which is technically a religious game because there's gods and, we're using those gods and playing with them. Sounds kind of strange from a religious point of view, but they're not as sensitive to cultural appropriation because there's so many games out there that do that kind of stuff. So, including computer games that kind of mess around with that religion aspect of it. And I don't think Santorini would be as popular if it was about Jesus and the 12 apostles. But I think if the game is respectful and it informs people about like a lesser known religion maybe or something like that, then it should be okay. I would love to see more games about like Celtic religions or paganism in general. I think that's a really cool idea, especially talking about Egypt and stuff and Ra, one of the originals.
Yeah, the
OG. I think that would be kind of cool.
I feel like it was easier to do back when it wasn't just like, oh, you've got one god. It's like, yeah, no, I've got like 60 of them. Yeah, and yet they all have different powers. It's like, oh, what happens if they fight?
Yeah, exactly. Like Zeus.
Yeah,
everyone knows about Zeus, and everyone knows about like Bacchus, the god of drinking and stuff like that. So there's like
Zeus with the power of infinite children,
turning into swans and stuff. These cool stories, and I think some of the older, especially Celtic religions, there are some cool stories in there, like Salmon of Knowledge and a lot of fighting bulls and stuff. So there's lots of cool things in there that you can touch with, and it's not more so about cultural appropriation as it is about learning and teaching people about those religions, which is a problem you can have today about Catholicism and stuff. You can't really talk about stuff like that because you might be wrong, and there's lots of interpretation.
Yeah, the Celtic mythologies and beliefs from back then. I feel our society in Ireland has definitely moved on, and I know like Celtic mythology is Scotland and Wales and other countries as well, and like then you get into Scandinavian countries and there was a lot of influence on each other back in the day. But I still wouldn't be offended if people use Celtic mythology. However, if people kind of don't research it, I still feel like I make fun of them.
Yeah, like when you see a really bad fake Irish accent in a movie, or they have clearly just Googled something about Ireland and they've way missed the point. Yeah, like, I mean, if you do your due diligence to a religion, it could have a place in a game where you're not being disrespectful to it, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Like if we did a game on, say, Asian mythology, it might be a little bit tricky. But if we did a game on Celtic mythology, I think we'd have the knowledge of what people feel about it today, as well as the knowledge of what people thought about it previously. So you're kind of steeped in the culture.
Yeah, I think that probably does make a really big difference. I personally would find it really difficult to bring religion into a board game. I think that, as Brian and Owen had alluded to, there's just so difficult a balancing act to not offend people or to slip up so many places that I even just find it overwhelming to delve into. And like we're talking about the different backstories, cultural appropriation comes into it as well, because even if you're just focusing on somebody's religion or some mythology, you then start into assuming things about their culture or assuming it. Now, I wouldn't personally take offense if people wanted to try, because at least they're trying to learn about, Celtic mythology. But I guess that's because it's not as intrinsically linked to everyday life as it would be. But I would still obviously make fun of them because if they got it wrong, because that's just the way we are.
The nature of us.
But we could have it the similar way that Senet happened, which is it grows up organically within the culture. And so, I could totally see a scenario where a really popular game, and then the Pope starts messing around with it a little bit and turns into a Catholic game, and then everyone who's a Catholic has to play this board game, and that'd be cool.
Ticket to Ride, the Vatican edition.
Yeah,
there's just one line. It's a very small place.
You could definitely see how if you're within the culture of a religion, you could then create a board game, and if it was popular enough, you could then do it, kind of how Senet did it. Now, Senet obviously had decades and centuries to deal with this before it fully became a fully part of their culture. And obviously in today's world, we have more than one board game. So that helps.
It does. And with that, Settlers of Catan does have a variant that has a biblical theme. Players play as tribes of Israel. I don't know how popular it was, but they did try that. And I think they picked a game that was already very popular. Like Settlers of Catan is a classic. And once you had somebody appropriately placed to be respectful of the religion who created that variant, I don't think, it was an official version. So they clearly condoned that attempt at it. The only religious game I could find that was very popular that was a biblical was The Acts. That was it has 7.9 rating on Board Game Geek, which is quite a high rating. So fair play to them. It's very well liked. But even so, if you read the comments, the person who created it must have been quite well educated on the religion or practicing, because they were very, very respectful of the biblical information. But there were still people who had different comments about it, because you then have comments based on religion and comments based on how good the board game is or how bad the board game is. They still managed to navigate that minefield. So fair play to them. It is possible.
Such a divisive issue, though.
I know.
Why would you add that complication to yourself?
Yeah, but
what if the act was based in space? Missionaries.
But imagine, a good thing is the Old Testament is a really good place to come up with board game ideas, because the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse are in quite a lot of computer games and board games.
True.
And obviously, if you're a board gamer, your comments might be like, the game is a little bit weak, it should be 5 Horsemen of the Apocalypse and stuff like that. Then it starts getting weird, because obviously it's not related to the actual religion. It's more related to mechanics of the board game. But yeah, you can
War, famine, pestilence, death, and bad dice rolling.
And 5th player expansion. So yeah, you can get into weird scenarios like that.
I can understand it. I can, if religion is a really big part of your life, then you're going to want to make games about it, because you just make games about everything. We make games about our enjoyment of using dice. Sometimes that's one of the biggest influences on how we design the game.
I designed bumper bots on Titan when I was up there and realized that this would be much easier done by bots. Why am I here? And then I came home, and now I'm designing a board game based on it.
And you stopped taking drugs.
Game changer.
But you watch a lot of science fiction films. If you didn't watch a lot of science fiction films, would you have picked space?
I will confidently say yes. Well, that's probably wrong.
That's what I'm saying. It might not be what you're doing, but maybe it's what you read or what influences you. And if religion is a really big part of your life, then that's probably something that influences you. So it's probably what your go-to is when you're making games or designing or being creative. That's part of who you are. So I can understand it, why some people would make it. I just don't think people who are not immersed in that culture necessarily should.
Yeah, I don't think this game would go down so well if it was called Bumper Bots in Palestine. I feel like that wouldn't be so good.
Probably wouldn't be quite respectful enough.
Maybe. Guys, I have a theme change idea.
No.
So back to Senet. So who played Senet, I guess, is the next question. We've kind of covered how we found out about it, but I think one of the key things to remember is Popular Mechanics said both royals and commoners play Senet throughout the Nile River Valley. So this is a little different from games like chess, which were supposedly introduced from Persia from India, but as part of courtly education of Persian nobility. So it has a history of being played by the well-educated, whereas we don't have the very far back origins of how Senet started. It was found a lot in the tombs of nobility, but commoners played it as well. That's a kind of an interesting change to how chess evolved. So it brought a lot of people together in a lot of different parts of society, and it was accessible, which can't always be said for board games. Owen, do you think that board games today are linked as tightly to being well educated as they would have been back in the past?
Well, I would say the first thing is that these days, I think anyone who went to primary school these days has probably a better education than Persian nobility.
Yeah, take that, Persians. Smack talking your nobility.
So the well-educated back then is probably a different thing. But yeah, I think it's awesome to see Senet being used by absolutely everybody. These days, I think people still like to challenge themselves. So whether they do a kind of true games like Sudoku or maybe Wordle, which is is really fun.
Love Wordle.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Probably better than chess or something like that. So maybe it's becoming solo, or maybe it's about ease of use or accessibility. And yeah, so I think board games have definitely opened up the ability to challenge each other in a fun and interesting way. Instead of just having Senet, we have thousands of board games to choose from. So yeah, I don't know if it's linked more so to being well educated versus accessibility and kind of finding what you want.
I think the variety of the board game hobby these days has really, it's been a game changer. It's opened it up. It's not as restrictive anymore. Like games like, chess and Go and stuff like that favor very strategic thinkers or people who are thinking 8, 10, 12, 60 steps ahead. You might associate the likes of chess with two very stuffy people sitting in a library playing it because they haven't played my 3-player chess. I'll get you.
Still can only play in the library though.
I don't know. The pieces don't work unless they're in the library. But because the hobby has evolved so hugely over the years, like you have games, say like Jungle Speed, which is, pattern matching and dexterity. That will suit some and not others. Like there's simplified versions of games. Like you've got Scythe, which you might say is quite a complicated game. But then you've got My Little Scythe, where you go around throwing pies at each other. And it's, in essence, it's a similar game, but it's a simplified version of it. A lot of games favor probability and calculations and stuff like that. But at the same time, there's a lot of luck-based games where you just kind of roll dice and hope for the best. And between party games and social games and stuff like that, like there really is games for absolutely everyone. I defy you to find today someone who's never played a board game ever. Actually, no, met a guy the other day who'd never even heard of board games. Never heard of them. He had kids. He'd never heard of board games. Like he was 60. How do you never have heard of them?
The thing about board games, though, is that a lot of things aren't board games, right? Like you don't like board games is such a generic term we have in the industry, but like things that aren't on the board, things that aren't games, like Werewolf is a good one. Is that a board game? What is it?
Yeah, I call it a board game, and then I get people correct me and go, "Oh, but there's no or I'd call Dice Summoners a board game," and people are like, "Well, there's no board," and I'm like.
And poker. Is poker a board game?
Conceptual boards.
Yeah.
Tabletop games. Like, well, Werewolf isn't tabletop. I mean, you could be on a tabletop. It seems pointless and clustered, but...
But you're right. The well-educated is a tricky one when it comes to the board game things. Like, I would say Trivial Pursuit is a good example of a game where, it's about the type of education you have. And I certainly don't like Trivial Pursuit because I don't know any general knowledge. I'm very bad at pub quizzes.
My knowledge isn't pub quiz based.
And I go to a pub quiz, I get the really weird questions about like programming or like fantasy stuff. But like, it's like, what was it? Like, how many miles per gallon does an Audi get? And I was like, I don't know.
That's also quite a niche question.
At least one.
But I don't, but the pub quiz, I'm really bad at pub quizzes.
Yeah, like I don't know that it is as broad sweeping as it could be. I still think that board games are quite niche. I just found that like it still feels sometimes a little bit like an in-group or like a clique. It's expensive to get a good game. So board games aren't cheap, but that's just because the appeal of board games is quite small. Now I know like Smiths or like generic toy stores.
Yeah.
Good save.
Didn't have to mention anyone specifically, so we covered that one. Nice.
But we only have like one in Ireland. Right? We have lots of little ones, which are great and have a lot more variety. But like the big ones only stock like a certain selection of mass-produced, probably not as deep board games. But that means that the jump for people from getting from a toy store board game, if you don't have a little small store that can maybe you can talk to the staff, or you can stock with like special things. Like those big brand places, they have to stock in certain games, and they can't just find you some small thing or recommend you some small game. Like if you don't have those niche shops, or you don't know about them, or I've seen people look in board game shops as they're walking by and then like hesitate at the door and then not go in. There's still this kind of gap that just means that people, even if they're interested, maybe, I don't know, is it education? Maybe they didn't. The rule books can be really complicated for somebody who's never played a board game or heard of a board game as the person that you met. And there's no universal ranking system on the boxes. So like a computer game, there's more information about how complicated or easy it is. And there's kind of a requirement that a computer game works and people play it. There's some on-screen tutorial and it forces you to learn the buttons. And then you play it for a month and then you forget all the buttons. And then you come back and then Kira can't play computer games anymore.
Yeah, how's your replay Witcher going?
Good. I've remembered all the buttons again. That took 3 weeks, sure. But you don't have that. I think that something like that might help. Like if there was just a rating system that was agreed upon on the industry so that people could go, okay, well, a 2 means I'm only going to have like a front and back of a rule book, and I'm going to be able to pick it up quickly.
Well, I think is that not what, like, I know it's probably not well known, but Board Game Geek does that. Like it has a complexity rating and an easiness to pick up rating and an overall enjoyment rating kind of thing.
Exactly, but that's real niche, right? Even people who play board games don't necessarily know about Board Game Geek.
Yeah,
I've known a lot of people, who play games casually, play advanced games, and don't know about Board Game Geek.
I think some of that would be because computer games are a little bit different in the fact that they can do usability differently. So you can pick up any computer game, put it in, and you can play it. It's just about a matter of figuring it out as you go. And so there's like design ways of doing that. Whereas board games are a little bit trickier because you have to actually explain the rules. And so if you were in a board game shop, I think it might be interesting to solve that problem with like maybe like a little video. So if you're like looking at Pandemic or even in the window, you can like view the rules being explained of Pandemic, or you get little things saying this is the BGG rank and the complexity and stuff. Like a way of kind of introducing people to the stuff on the internet that helps them.
I can categorically say that if I had to watch a video about every board game I picked up, I would not play board games anymore.
No, yeah, but I mean, like, imagine you're in a board game shop. You have like the family fun games, and then the really strategic games, and you're looking at Gaia Project, and you're not really sure what it is. You can then like click a button or whatever in the board game shop, and this little screen pops up saying, "Hey," or pretty much just it's like Google. It's just like, what I'm trying to say is,
we should have some sort of device in our pocket that had access to this information.
Exactly. Also, this is probably a bit of a flaw in my plan.
Well, if like Google will give you everything about that board game, right? So it'll give you the good reviewers and the bad reviewers. It's just some sort of universally agreed that the Google result is the BGG ranking. So that's fine. That's a reliable ranking. Whereas like one guy who played it one time in some, I don't imagine where he is, doesn't really matter, but like records a video about it and it's just not his game. Like you don't want that sort of, you want the...
Yeah, because in computer games, you don't ask the person, at least I don't, in GameStop, like, oh, have you played the new Tomb Raider? What's it like? Do you think it'll suit me? Whereas in board game shops, you kind of do have to do that with the person. You'd be like, oh, I like strategic games and I have 6 friends. Is Gaia Project for me? And the guy would be like, oh yeah, I've played that. And then kind of explain it. So
I largely assume people working in retail don't want to talk to customers.
They don't, but they have to.
I have to say, the board game shop guys in Dublin are pretty good. They will answer. They'll give you, but you have to go up to them. Actually, some days you don't. Some days, if they're not that busy, they will come around and ask people in the store, which is great. But even that, to know that you'd have to talk to the person, because a lot of stores you don't, right? Yeah. You go clothes shopping. You don't go, oh, well, maybe you do. I don't know.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
Not, most people don't.
Be lucky if I try to close on before I buy it.
The fact that you need to talk to the retail expert and that it's actually a situation where their knowledge is important for you to figure out if you like the game and how hard it is. This sort of stuff means that from the outside looking in.
It's a barrier. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a barrier.
So like, you have to imagine back in the Senet days, they probably would have just Googled Senet and
we sorted. They didn't know, and they go, oh, the complexity rating of 3, that's fine.
Oh, Senet 2000 year limited edition.
Yeah, but people don't Google the rules of chess and stuff like that. You learn, I learned chess on the streets. So I assume how people did on Senet.
At knife point.
Well, no, you just meet people who played chess before who have chess sets. You play chess with them and you learn as you go. And then you figure out later on that there's things like books.
I feel like your experience with chess isn't necessarily globally representative.
Well, this is before Google. This is before the internet, you know?
How old is Owen? Jeez, I know he's my younger brother, but like...
They're all old.
So anyway, which of today's board games do you think will last 2,500 years into the future?
Like, chess has already been around for about 1,500 years at this point. I'm really excited for the anniversary edition. Can't wait to see what they do with this. Go is another one. I think Go has been like 4,000 years or something like that. So in your face, Senet. But then again, that's just pebbles on a board. I feel like it was easier to do. Well, I think, and in your face, Go. Smack talk in every game. We don't discriminate here. I think something that would really stand the test of time is probably going to be something simple. Like I think it's going to be a deck of cards. I think like a game of poker or Snap, or even though everyone had their own name and version for it, was like Kings or Cups, or a game where you play sevens that skip things. Don't even remember my own name for it. No.
We call it Hearts.
Puzzles, yeah.
No, Hearts was the game with 4 people, but yeah, you guys call it Hearts. So no, I think one that is going to survive is probably going to be a deck of cards and a game based around it. I feel like someday an archaeologist will find a load of random Monopoly pieces made out of plastic, or, you know, little miniature trains from Ticket to Ride, and they'll be like, what in the name of what are these? What was wrong with people back then? But you might find a deck of cards, and like maybe there's a printed rule book for some, like for poker or for Snap or for something there beside it, and you know, at least you've got that version of it, and maybe they can understand you can play different games with the cards. I think it's going to be something that simple that's going to stand the test of time.
I watched a documentary on bridge on Amazon Prime the other day, and it was serious. They take that really a lot of money in bridge.
There is.
And Bill Gates is in the documentary, and there's cheating in the documentary. It was great. So yeah, but yeah, like if they just caught a pack of cards, there's no way to be able to figure out how to play bridge.
Just get over it, huh? Yes. Bridge puns.
Oh, good idea. Yeah, I get it. I got it now. Yeah, it's really, really impressive. I still haven't played bridge yet, but I did watch a documentary on bridge. You'd think I'd know how to play bridge after watching a documentary on it. They don't mention the rules.
A documentary on the seedy underbelly of bridge.
There's a lot of cheating, a lot of like very specific
No
cheating.
longer just for your grandparents anymore, folks.
But yeah, I think if you're talking about games that last 2,500 years, I think the obvious one is Pandemic.
The PTSD of board games.
Yeah, I'm not. That's all I'm going to say on Pandemic. I'm not going to say why in 2,500 years we'll still be playing it and it'll be popular.
I feel like we're going to be 2,000 years in the future. When someone goes, "Do you want a game of Pandemic?" and everyone's going to duck under the table or something.
We'll be half bat people.
Oh, I like moving away from the crab evolution that we're.
But yeah, I think some games. I think so. I hope social games. Obviously, they'll be around in 2,500 years, but I hope some of the originals will still be there, like Mafia Werewolf. That game, I think it's a classic one because if you're in Mars as astronauts and you forgot to bring the board games, you're going to play Werewolf.
You can still play. You can just write it on little scraps of paper.
I don't think they have scraps of paper on the moon, but they probably have little tablets. You could just write on little tablets and then hand out the tablets. I see. No, we can work out the technicalities of it later. You're right.
But you don't need anything.
I'm getting hung up.
You don't need anything for Werewolf. You just need people to close their eyes and open their eyes.
And I need to know, did you know if they're a werewolf?
Yeah, but you can do that in the game. You can touch people.
Oh, yeah. That's how, because there was a games master,
Duck,
wasn't there?
Yeah, there's one who tells the story, yeah.
Duck Duck Goose, the advanced version.
Extreme.
It tends to be, the only problem with that concept is it tends to be whoever's closest to the narrator at the time. They don't want to walk everywhere. But yeah, and then Love Letter. Love Letter is a classic. I was thinking about Munchkin, but Love Letter, we play it all the time, and it's a classic one. It's really simple and nothing changes, and it's very random. But
it's quite an old game already, isn't it?
No, that's just it. It's not that old, right?
Really
Because I assumed it was like maybe 40 years old or something like that. Like it's a very classic. Well, maybe not 40, but I thought it was a really old game. It's not. It's a very new game. Like relatively speaking, Settlers of Catan is much older than it,
and it hasn't lost its style. There's lots of Love Letter alternatives. Depends on new TV shows and movies come out. They'll make a Love Letter of it, but it's very fun to play.
Yeah, I suppose nice and quick.
Kira, what do you think?
So I think Settlers of Catan is a classic. It has appeal to everyone. It's got strategy, but not too much that you feel overwhelmed. And it's got random and it's got stealing. So there's player interaction, forcefully or otherwise. I think just that sort of classic. I think it has to be something that's got a broad reach. I just think niche games come and go. And even though some of my favorite games, I think like Blood Rage and stuff like that, that was a small print run. Like, it's a really good game. I don't know how big the print run is, to be fair, but it just, you want one that's just that's in shops that aren't just board game shops, I guess. I think Ticket to Ride might. People who don't play board games, Settlers of Catan and Ticket to Ride are two they know. They often know, even though they're not Monopoly. And I think that makes all the difference. I think that audience reach, for better or worse, is going to be the key factor in how long a game survives.
Settlers of Catan is the Senet of board games? That doesn't make any sense.
Senet is the Senet of board games.
Yeah, Senet is the Senet of board games. And then Settlers of Catan is a new evolution of the modern board game. Because it is like the first one.
Yeah, it's a real trailblazer.
And so when
the modern board game.
So if you do a Kickstarter of board games and you start getting into the hobby, and then you tell them that you haven't played Settlers of Catan, that makes people very happy because they're like, "This is the fucking original. This is the G. This is the OG."
Agreed. So that pretty much wraps up the podcast on ancient Egyptian board games. Well, specifically Senet. Follow us on social media to help us out. We've been decking out some games. Thanks for listening. See ya.
See ya.
Bye.